My name is Vincent Slatt. I'm the Director of Archiving with the Rainbow History Project. Welcome to tonight's event, Talking Trans History. It is the 24th of January, 2023. We're at the Southwest DC Public Library branch. The Rainbow History Project is our local nonprofit dedicated to collecting, preserving, and promoting the history of LGBTQ Washingtonians. This year, we've received a grant from the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Affairs in order to do a trans history initiative. So as part of that publicly funded opportunity, we're hosting this panel tonight. With that, I'd like to introduce Japer Bowles, who is the Mayor's liaison to the LGBTQ community. He heads the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Affairs. Japer.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. As Vincent said, this is a really exciting, innovative program to support members of our trans community. We're very excited to hear the stories. Of course, we want to provide jobs and housing, but if we're not talking about the stories and the history, then we're not telling the whole story of why we have dedicated resources for our LGBTQ plus community. So I'm really, really excited to work for a mayor who not only is fighting for things for our community, but truly funding these opportunities. That is all really. This is about you and about our trans community. So I'm here to listen, and then at the end, give you your flowers, because that's what we're here for. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Japer. Thank you. So before I do introductions of our panelists for the evening, just wanted to remind people that in general for our community, it is important to mourn your losses, for they are many, and celebrate your victories, for they are too few. So before we begin today, I just wanted to point out that we recently had the murder of a trans sister here in the community, trans Black woman, Star Parker. There were a few other deaths recently in the trans community that we should know about. Ms. Candy, Terry Holland, and Isaac Tank Payton all recently passed away. So if you would please join me in a moment of silence for their memory. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. For tonight's panel, we have three distinguished members of the trans community here to tell us about their history. How this is going to kind of work, I'm going to read their brief bios and introduce them so that you know which name and beautiful voice goes with which person up here. And so then I'm going to, present a couple of ideas for them to talk about. It's their talking, their history. And so then we're going to give them that open mic opportunity to tell us their history, and hopefully they'll ask each other some questions back and forth. And at the end, there'll be opportunity for us to ask some questions as well. Okay? So our first panelist that we have here, Earline Budd, has been a trans-identified activist since the 1970s. During the 1980s, she started her work with HIV and AIDS support. She has won several discrimination lawsuits, including against the DC Department of Corrections for its treatment of trans inmates. She has worked with incarcerated people and sex workers and founded both Trans Health Empowerment and Empowering the Transgender Community. Earline has won numerous awards, including the Engendered Spirit Award from Capital Pride Alliance and the Trans Equality Now Award from the National Center for Trans Equality. In 2007, she received Rainbow History Project's Community Pioneer Award. Next, we have Rayceen Pendarvis, an event host, speaker, community advocate, and lifelong Washingtonian. In addition to hosting and co-hosting events by Team Rayceen Productions, right? Including 10 years of the Ask Rayceen show from 2012 to 2021, Rayceen regularly hosts festivals, fundraisers, and various annual events. Over the decades, Rayceen has received numerous honors, among them being recognized as a Capital Pride Hero in 2016, being named a local hero by the Washington Blade in 2021, and voted most committed activist in the Washington Blade 2022 Best of LGBTQ DC Reader's Choice Awards. As an inspirational speaker, well, there's more. As an inspirational speaker, a tireless advocate for the community, disseminator of information, and host of numerous LGBTQ pride events, Rayceen has earned the monikers High Priestess of Love, Goddess of DC, Queen of the Shameless Plug, and Empress of Pride. Right? Now that's a bio, okay? Okay, and just as wonderful, we have Gabrielle Thomas, affectionately known as Gibby. She's a native Washingtonian who began her work in the LGBT community in 1989 as a caregiver for people with HIV. She has worked for Us Helping Us, Transgender Health Empowerment, Terrific Incorporated, and currently Damien Ministries and its trans-specific programming called Shug's Place. Gibby is committed to serving the transgender older adult community and is dedicated to educating older adults in the area of safer sex and healthy relationships, and the tools needed to increase healthier outcomes in all areas of our community. In 2011, she was honored with the Engendered Spirit Award by Capital Pride. In 2021, she was honored with an award from the trans-masculine community for the work she has done for the trans communities. With that, a little round of applause for our panelists.
Correction, I'm not a native Washingtonian.
Okay.
I grew up in Maryland, actually, right over the district line. I grew up in a small town called North Brentwood, Maryland, which is between Mount Rainier and Hyattsville on Route 1. So
Good.
I'm a Marylander.
Set the record straight.
You've been around so long.
I know, I've been in D.C. so long.
Okay. So what we're going to hear about today is I'm going to ask each of you to just give us a little bit of your biography, you know, a couple words about who you are, how you got to be who you are, and then your start in our community. Some of the successes and the triumphs and the tribulations you've had. I want to hear a little bit about your work with the AIDS services and the community support that y'all have done in that area. Some of the successes with incarceration, the trial, and some of the things you've brought about change for, Earline. And I also want to hear about some of our elders in our community, the trailblazers that have added to Washington history, the important trans people who have left that we need to remember, okay? And kind of where we're going forward from here. And I'll warn you now, my last question of the night is also going to be, if you could say something to your teenage self, what would that be? So think that one through. That's what we're going to end with. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Earline.
Oh, wow. That caught me off guard. I just knew Gibby was going to be first. So, Vincent, let me just say thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this esteemed panel of individuals, especially Rayceen and then Gibby, who I often talk to on a regular. It is my honor and pleasure to be here to talk about my history and some of the accomplishments and other things that have happened in my life. First and foremost, again, I am Earline Budd. I'm known as the Advocate. I am 64 years old, I'm proud to say. But I came up in an era when you didn't think that you would make it past 40. And so that's what's so exciting about just being here today. And so I want to go back a little bit, just briefly kind of touch on history and move to where we are today quickly as we have a certain amount of time to present. First and foremost, I came up in a family that was very religious, holy, and around, I want to say about 8 or 9, I guess kind of my mother and them found me to be different. The difference was They would lay my clothes out, or my sister's clothes and my clothes, for us to go to school. And when I would come downstairs, I would always have on my sister's clothes. And then my mother had what we call back in those days a switch. And she would say, let me get this switch. Why do you have on your sister's clothes? I say, Mommy, it fit. She said, no, it does not. You're a boy. And let me just tell you, that went on and on until I got to be like 13 or 14. And I was always big for my size. So I ended up putting on some of Mommy's clothes and bras and just walk around the house when she was not there. And I went to Garrison Elementary School. And so they had a play they would have. And so everybody had to pick a part in a role. And so one of them was a person called Geraldine Flip Wilson. So I immediately jumped on it and hopped on that and told him, I want to be Geraldine. So I said, yes, baby, I get to put my hair on and my little garments and my clothes. And let me just tell you, Geraldine stuck with me through that whole teen year of elementary school. And I actually, about 15, I was like almost grown. I was actually sneaking out of the house, believe it or not, guys, and going down to 8th Street, where they said, well, that's where they hang at, Joe People. And so eventually, my dad got hip to me putting the ladder at the back of the house and going out my window with my little bag and getting in my female clothes. So he decided to move the ladder one time. And he moved that ladder, and I came home. I'd had me tipsy. I was drunk at 15, all that. Believe it or not, I was proposed to by a sailor, too. When I was 15, he thought I was the cutest little thing. And then when someone told him, said, I think you better look at what the age is you messing with. But anyhow, Daddy and them caught onto it, and I had to go around and knock on the front door. And when I knocked on the front door, my father said, who is it this time of morning? I said, Daddy, it's me. And when he came down and saw me in my garments and this wig and makeup, he said, boy, what are you doing? And he called my mother. And I tell you, I got a whooping like no, but I was so tipsy, I couldn't feel nothing. But he whooped me and he whooped me. Till the next day, honey, when I woke up, he was coming down with the switch again. I said, what is all this for? Keep whooping me like this. He said, you're going to change because this is on your mother's side. This is not on my side. And she hollering down the step, no, it's not, Doc, that's on your side. Short to the story ended out being that on my father's side, his brother and an uncle were all gay. And of course, I got banned out from the family, couldn't get the family heirlooms and the money with the grandparents. It was rich and Killington and all that. So eventually, I went to Woodworth and Loafers and stole myself some bras and panties. And the security met me at the door and said, just come this way, jacked me up from the back and said, come on here. And I said, what are you doing? He said, come on. And we said, lift this up. And I had bras and panties for God. And he said, well, what are you doing, little boy? No, he said, little girl first. And then I said, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy. And he said, what in the world? Let me call your father. What's the number? I gave him the number, called my father, and my father said, I don't want him back. And he said, well, what are we supposed to do with him? He said, I don't know, he's out of control. He said, oh, you saying he's out of control? We had a PINS program. Some people remember it, the People in Need of Supervision program. Do you know that I went through that for 4 years, back and forth, because they kept calling my father, and then it took a case manager who eventually got me out. But that history carried on with me, just to let you guys know. It carried on until I was an adult. It did. I learned going to jail, and then I ended up finding myself in the prison, the actual prisons. And then in the early 80s, about 89 or so in there, I got out of the federal prison. And the first place I found was in need of trying to figure out how to be myself and where I could go. So I went to the HCC, the HIV Community Coalition. And that's where I got my first start. Most people don't believe it, but my first start actually working with a woman named Dee Carey. Ms. Curry was then in charge of a program called TAD. Most people won't remember, Darby remembers it. Transgenders Against Defamation and Discrimination in the District. That could have been a phenomenal program here in DC, but unfortunately, Ms. Curry has not gotten to that point yet where she wanted to elevate to do that. But anyhow, thanks to her, I became an advocate. I challenged the halfway house I was in about not wanting me to wear female clothes, telling me that this is a male halfway house. You come in here with your eyes and lashes and done, and then the boys are looking at you at breakfast and licking their tongue and all that. No, we're not doing it. So I went from there. I successfully completed my Hope Village halfway house tenure, and then I ended up getting involved with an organization called the Inner City AIDS Network. Back in those days, that was called ICANN. And guess what? Despite what people say in terms of gay men don't like transgender women, they were mostly gay men, Gibby will agree with me on that ran that program. And guess what? They got me ready, baby. I became a peer specialist. And Gibby and I and all of us ended up doing our first fundraiser for LaShawn Evans, who I will never forget. LaShawn we sent her, raise money at the brass rail to send her to Kenya for the Kimron treatment. So I felt honored, and that was a part of our history and my history that I share, and Gibby and I were talking about it the other day. But I went from there and started going into the park and doing sandwiches in little bags, and the Department of Health approached me in 2000 or so and asked me, would you like to become an organization, or do you have something for trans? And we don't have nothing. I said, well, I don't know. They said, well, okay, we're going to give you $25,000 to think about it. I said, who? $25,000? That's a lot of lashes and pantyhose. And the lady said, no, not for that. I said, what am I supposed to do with it? She said, get someone, a writer or someone to write something else, get you a board of directors and all that. I said, Lord, who knows about that? But lo and behold, I went to next door to HCC, right, Darby, was Us Helping Us. And just to let you guys know, Dr. Ron Simmons was in charge back in those years. And Ron, I just tear up when I think about him. I love Ron so much. Do you know he opened the doors? I sat with him, and it wasn't about the money. And he said, Earline, you need some help? I will help you to become an organization. You're going to have to watch me as a director and all that. I said, Ron, I would love it. And he even took, after we got the money, and gave us a space, right, Darby, on 10th, what was that, 10th Street around there where we met. We had a whole little house to ourselves. And we had our meetings, and everything was just fabulous. And so eventually, I did get, I guess, all the leadership training and stuff I needed with Us Helping Us. And my first organization that, and I did say first, was Transgender. And this was because not of me. I don't ever claim something that's not my doing. It was because of a woman named Jessica Xavier, which I'll never forget. We discussed it in the group. And we said, well, what should we name the group? So Jessica said, well, just to help you guys out, transgender should be the first, you know. Then she said, the disparity in health is significant. So why not transgender health? And then the last one was, she said, the self-esteem of individuals, which is called empowerment. And we became Transgender Health Empowerment. And I can only tell you guys that transgender health empowerment flourished. And what happened was, my crazy self, I take ownership. I love to do case management so much. I just love helping people. I do. So as a director, we were at 1711 North Capitol Street. And we were at 1711 North Capitol Street. And so we opened up, and guess what? I just could not stay up in my office. Every time they looked, I was sitting down there with clients. They say, well, who is she? They said, that's the director. So at some point, what ended up happening was, I asked Mr. Hall, Anthony Hall, who was my son, I'll never forget it, and I asked him, would he take over the leadership and become the director, and I be the senior case manager? And he said, Ma, are you sure this is what you want to do? And I said, yes, I'm sure. We went to San Francisco to a conference and everything. We was in the room, Valerie Spencer, Joanne Keatley, and myself, and they read me up and down. They said, how dare you give away something that you work so hard to get. And she said, secondly, nothing against gay men. A gay man cannot run a transgender organization. She said, you need to rethink that. And I was telling her, oh, child, I ain't doing that. So I ended up going to Miracle Hands, where I had a whole big office, and I felt fabulous and all of that. Us help THE flourish more with Mr. Hall, and I have to say that they end up getting grant to 250,000, 400,000, and at that point we ended up open. And I was a part of it. I would come in the evenings and work, doing my little case management and just loving doing it. It ended up opening up the Wanda Austin House, which is now known as the Wanda Austin Foundation. Most people don't know that we started that. And then we had a house at, what was that, on Rhode Island Avenue? Yeah. We had a supportive housing through HOPWA, Housing Opportunities for People Living with HIV, on Rhode Island Avenue. And that was everything that, we could want. And then, of course, in 2013, the sad thought of the story ends with the fact that the agency had to shut down because of not paying payroll taxes and things like that. And thanks to our esteemed Lucha Barrow, who brought that story to light, because we didn't know why we didn't have no jobs. But once he published it in the Blade, he said, did you hear? Girl, y'all ain't paid no payroll tax. I said, oh, Lord Jesus. So that is something that has stuck with me, and today it still sticks with me, because I do have a new organization called Empowering the Transgender Community, ETC, which I'm flourishing with, trying to get things straight, and I'm learning from my mistakes. I really am. So just to shortcut some of the stuff I was told to talk about was, there were several cases. The first case was the National Skating Rink, called the Calorama Road Skating Rink. I sued them, Mr. Charles Hawkins, I'll never forget his name. I sued them through the Office of Human Rights. To my amaze, I never knew that the Office of Human Rights was so powerful. The man sat there at the hearing, and they asked him, say, well, did you tell Miss Budd that she need to use the bathroom, the men's bathroom, and come out of all that glamour stuff? He said, I sure did. He said, we got kids coming in there skating. And he coming in here like that with them long coats and boots and cowboy hats. And they said, we caution you on what you say. Ended up winning that case. And guess what? To me, I didn't know anything about the money. So they said, well, what do you want in terms of compensatory? I said, I didn't ask for anything, just a letter of apology. They say, just a letter of apology? So, well, we'll give you the least that you can get $400. And he wrote that check with hesitation. You should have seen his face. So that led me to being a real advocate. And I went back to the Department of Corrections over in 1901, myself and Miss Patty D, and then we decided to go to Lorton to visit some, we call it trade, and the boys. They went and got the lieutenant and brought him out there. And he looked at me and said, what in the hell? What the hell? Bud. I said, excuse me? It's Earline Budd. He said, no, it ain't no damn Earline Budd. You a man. He said, you was in here. I said, and I've been out here past my time in terms of out of jail that I'm able to come visit. He said, no, not up in here, you not. You're not coming up in here dressed like that. You and this, what is this one with the big old whatever? And she ain't even dressed right because Patty had her titties out and all that. But anyhow, it was a mess. And so I said to Patty, we went back to the car, I was crying, and she said, what we gonna do? I said, girl, we gonna sue them. I said, but let's go up to the other jail first. Let's go to 1901, now that we done did Lorton, let's turn them too. And sure as day, when I got up to 1901, do you know they went and got the captain for me up there too and say, Bud, man, why are you coming in here doing that? You know you can't come in here dressed disguised like that. I say, disguised? He say, well, what do you call it? You's a man. You should come in men clothes. He said, you come in here dressed like that so you can take that off and give it to one of the inmates so they can come out. I said, what are you talking about? It ended it. I said, well, guess what? I'm going to sue you. He said, well, sue me. I went to the Office of Human Rights, and they consolidated complaints, and lo and behold, it didn't take long. We had all these meetings with the director for the Department of Corrections. I forgot, I think it was Devin Brown, may have been Devin Brown, or Washington back then. But anyhow, myself and Patty sat there with our attorney, a transsexual woman, I forgot her name, but she was our attorney, and she whipped them one side to the other. She talked about the Human Rights Act and how they had degraded. And of course, you know, I did my fabulous tears. I teared up for about 20 minutes. And the end of the story was we both ended up getting paid out, and our attorney ended up getting paid as well. So those were the two cases that I did, and those are the things that made me to the place where I am today in terms of what I'm doing and the work that I'm doing. But I've just had a fabulous ride. I cannot lie to you all. I've had a fabulous ride. And I always say when I speak and do these panels, when I look back over my life, I can truly say that I've been blessed. And y'all, I've been blessed. I'm on dialysis and all the other things that one can do. And I'm the liaison for the Department of Corrections still. I'm getting ready to retire from that. Let a young girl get in there. But the point is, I'm doing the work and doing the best I can. I currently, so that we're clear, as you all see me with, don't confuse it, I work for HIPS. I call it Helping Individual People Survive. And we do some phenomenal work at HIPS in terms of helping folks that are struggling with substance abuse, sex work, survival. And I'm just so pleased that some of my colleagues are here with me. Abigail is there, stand up Abigail. Then we have Miss Imani, stand up Imani. And we have Randy Cure right there, stand up Randy. So it is just, for me, it's amazing, it's wonderful. And I'm so happy to be in this room with you all tonight. And I'm just looking forward to answering any questions that you guys may have of me. And by the way, I ended up being successfully, I've owned my home for 22 years in Northeast DC. So that's what I'm doing right now. And thank you so very much, Vincent, again. Hopefully I didn't go over my time. Yeah, you did. Oh, shoot, I'm sorry. Oh, Lord. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to give you all some of the rich history, and we don't want to talk about awards and all that, you know, the mirror on H Street and all that stuff. That's too much. So, now Vincent, thank you. Who's next?
Well, I'll try to keep it brief. Timekeeper. Okay. I'm honored and grateful to be here to share this panel with two amazing lights in our community, two amazing souls that I've known over 30 years plus, and I'm grateful. As an activist, as a host, I have been blessed to do many things. For many who do not quite know how to identify or ask me to identify, first of all, I'm a human being. I am a father of 5 and mother of many. These are my sisters that I sit with. So many times people say, Rayceen, how do you identify? I'm a human being first and foremost, a child of God. And my trans sisters uplifted me first, embraced me first. I came out in a community that our transgendered sisters were always on the front line. I remember growing up in DC, and when we gathered at a place called Franklin Park. Franklin Park was the proving ground. The transgenders on one side, the hookers in the middle, and the pimps and prostitutes on the other end. And the proving ground was if you could walk through Franklin Park, you couldn't go around, you had to walk completely through to the other side and did not get beaten and did not get bottles. And because I had the ability, I was quick on my feet and I could make people read and laugh. So I always embraced everything with laughter. When they would call me out by name, I said, well, that's the only thing you got? You can't call me anything else? You know, so I would always embrace those who did not embrace us. So it was through laughter and understanding when they would call us names that were not accommodating to who we were, I always would turn it back on them. And I said, that's all you got? That's a 3-letter word, and give me something else. You know, but at the end of the day, you're still my brother and sister, regardless of whether or not you identify in the LGBTQIA community. We are still people of color, and we are oppressed in this world. And as oppressed people, we have to uplift each other. And so you find that common thread. And it was people in the community, because I was young and tender and size 9. young and tender. And I would, and because I grew, my own hair was long and flowing. I went from an afro to shoulder length hair, and I always looked very girly. So the girls embraced me. So I would sit with them, and I would sit with all these wonderful transgender, amazing warriors. Pat Hamilton, who was amazing. People, Rayceen Pendarvis, who was my second mother, who created a ballroom community in DC, and for many of those who don't know, we had a thriving ballroom community. Paris didn't just burn in New York, it burnt in DC. So it was because of Rayceen Pendarvis and places that we used to have balls in the WST, which is now the 930 Club, and lodges, the Elk Lodges all throughout the city. And we would hold them, the Black Nugget, and places like that, and we would have places and we would command our own spaces. And it's because of the trans women who were on the forefront. Adrienne Blackwell was the door person at the brass rail. She liked you, you could get in. If she didn't like you, she would read you down. And she was someone who was unapologetically herself. She was free. She wore the long braids all the way down past her butt. And she would turn DC out, and she was amazing, and she was wonderful. People like Joanne. Joanne was about 7 feet, flat foot. And Joanne worked at the Washington Hospital Center and was one of the first transgender women who was openly transgender in the hospital center. Now, mind you, Joanne wasn't no beauty, but because she had this femininity that just exuded and took up a room, she made you look at her like she was Beyonce. And being 7 foot tall and very commanding, she would open her mouth and this voice would just come out of her mouth, and it was like a siren singing. And I remember going to see a friend of mine's father at Washington Hospital Center. He said, Rayceen is this lady that comes to take care of me. She's about 7 feet tall. She's a little rough on the eyes, but she's so wonderful and so friendly. She picks me up and puts me on my bed, and in walks Joanne. And I said, there she is. Oh, Joanne's wonderful. He says, that's the lady that takes care of me. That's the woman who comes in here and bathes me. That's the woman who always sits by my bedside and sing to me or read scriptures to me. That woman is my caretaker. Joanne would walk through Washington Hospital Center and no one would once ever say that is other than what she appeared to be. Tina Teasley, I worked in the beauty industry. Tina Teasley was one of those people who commanded a space and demanded that folks who were in recovery, that folks didn't talk about them, but would bring them into spaces and she made sure that LGBT people in recovery and living with HIV were always accepted and created safe spaces. She worked with Dr. Galati at Howard University to bring in a place and a space that folks who were in recovery had somewhere to meet and living with the virus, that they made sure that Howard University was on the forefront and gave them spaces. And she made sure that when she would see her trans sisters and brothers out there, and eventually she would plant the seeds, sister, you ain't got to be out there too long, that recovery. She made sure that when Black Pride first started, that they had rooms that folks could go into and talk about, I'm a recovering addict and I'm going to come to Pride, but I need a place that I can feel safe in. And she created that. Earline created the first gay American Idol for Black Pride. She brought in Frenchie Davis at the historical Howard Theater and brought that show to the Lincoln and brought that. And then people don't talk about how we had a community of trans folks that at the Howard Theater, there was a jewel box review that traveled all over the country. That many people didn't know that the jewel box review was transgender women, but there was only one woman in the group. But they were so fascinating and captivating on the stage that they would fool the audience. Could no one realize who the real woman was? And then they had Stormy, who was a transgender man, who was the door person. So people don't know that review came in Washington, D.C., when Mom's Mabel came to D.C. That around the corner at the Howard Theater, they had an after-hour joint that they made sure that they had a place, a safe haven, that Black Broadway along U Street corridor from 9th all the way over to 18th Street, that they made sure that they had safe spaces for LGBT people in the community. I might have been young, but I remember, because I lived on 13th Street, and I remember Moms Mabel inviting people in, walking along U Street, and little did I know that I would identify with who she was eventually, because Moms Mabel was, during the day, she wore suits and ties, and she was very masculine presenting. And when she got on the stage, she was Moms, but other than that, she was Mr. Moms. And she hung with all the people like Roberta Baldwin, who was a transgender woman who had the first after-hour joint in D.C. She ran numbers. And she employed transgender folks in the community and gave them jobs. And she was revered in the underworld. Roberta Baldwin would wear her big hats and would walk through the place and walk through and shake up a room. And known folks in the underworld respected Roberta Baldwin because of who she was. And the racetrack. And how she played numbers and went to the racetrack. And she would sit with the likes of Bumpy Johnson from Harlem and that underground world. And she would sit with these underground folks. And she would command spaces and would be who she was, because she was unapologetically, I'm a trans woman and I'm here and there's nothing you can do about it because my money is green and it spins like yours. And she kept a gun in her purse at all times. And Kiva, one of the greatest designers in DC that did design for a lot of fashion shows, Ebony Fashion Fair, and entertained us all across the country, who was a known transgender woman, but was revered because her talent spoke. And it was not questionable about who she was, it was about how she took up spaces. And then I had the ability, because of who I am, I've always used my platforms, thank God I've been around, to see all of the prides and host all of the prides. Youth Pride, Black Pride, Trans Pride, Latinx Pride, Senior Pride. And I'm grateful to be able to go into spaces and work with organizations, Whitman Walker, Washington Blade, and all of these wonderful places who have allowed me to come and work with them and partner up and create Team Rayceen. And that's why I am the queen of the shameless plug. I believe in plugging things that we need to do. Yes. And when after 10 years of creating a free talk show in the city that we started at the Martin Luther King Library, then we went into the historical Bohemian Cavern, then we went to HRC and they opened the doors and brought us in. And I made sure that politicians, prostitutes, recording artists, and all of those people had a place to showcase or talk about, or our allies came in spaces and it was free. That it would be free, that you could come into a space where you might not have the money to come, but you could come and sit to lights with a national recording artist and sit with council members and congresswomen and talk about the importance of, if I'm voting for you, that make sure that our LGBT vote is heard. And I want to talk to you. If you want my vote, let me tell you what you're going to do for us. That I was grateful that I could able to partner up and do those things, and then create a YouTube channel, RAYCEEN.com, Team Rayceen on YouTube. That is why I'm the queen of the shameless plug. If you don't plug and promote what you're doing, and you shame on you. I have to do what I do because I'm grateful. Because when the younger generation sees me and talks to me, I tell me, baby, I live for public transportation. Please stop me on the bus and talk to me. And it's important when younger people talk to you and say thank you. And it's important for someone who is elder that I can say, no, thank you. Thank you, that it's because of us that the shoulders that you stand on. And young people, I want to hear from you. I want to understand that you, all of us, have a right at the table. That even though we are now your elders, don't throw us away, because I'm like Queen Elizabeth. I'm not giving up the throne until it's time. So let us be there and let us be heard and let us share our stories, because our stories matter. And people, that there's so many times that I mentioned a lot of people that sometimes you will never know who these people are. It is because of people like Tina Teasy, Roberta Baldwin, and Janice, and Pat Hamilton, trailblazers who broke down, June Holly, broke down these doors, saw these people, and they were they lived in their truth. These were transgender women and transgender men. Magoo, one of the. And when we talk about Magoo, we gotta honor Magoo. Magoo has an amazing life as a transgender man. That's what we gonna call Magoo, because that's who Magoo presents in the world. Magoo was a revered drug dealer. Could shake a room up, but was more than just that. Magoo understood that, I used and created a space because sometimes the playing field for LGBT people or trans people is never fair. That some folks got to go through back doors in order to come through the front doors. That sometimes we got to use the underworld. Some people got to use sex work, and some people got to sell drugs. That they got to use whatever the means. That sometimes in a world that does not celebrate who we are, we created spaces that we created our own and created our own clubs and created our own views and our own avenues, that we made money and we did what we did. And then somebody like Magoo has become this amazing activist, has turned his life around, has gotten folks in recovery, gotten folks into housing, got folks off of drugs, and works at the Department of Correction. There's somebody who's a former person is now getting folks out and getting them a pathway to making a better way of life. So many times that folks look at transgender people and just see the dark side and don't see the beauty. And don't see the beauty of the dark side. Even in the midst, some folks say, I don't have to be here and I don't choose to always be here, but I'm using this to do what I need to do to get through, because it's a means of, when you close the door, I open a window. And they open the window and they soar like birds and eagles. And I thank you. I'm over my time. Thank you very kindly.
Okay, so, yeah, I'm glad they went first, because they remind me of so many things that I needed to say, and I just forgot them all. Okay, so my name is Gabrielle Thomas. My nickname, or my other name, is Gibby. So I'm 65 years old. I'll be 67. I'll be 66 in I'll be 66 April the 6th. Okay. So I wasn't born in D.C., but D.C. is my second home. I came to D.C. in about I graduated in 75, so I think it started coming to D.C. in like 76. And I went to Northwestern Senior High School in Adelphi, Maryland. So and I'm a child of desegregation. My elementary school was closed in PG County because of desegregation. So we started desegregating the schools around the time that I was going to the schools. And Northwestern was a wonderful place. I was a member of the student government there. They tried to give me homecoming queen, and I was the one that counted the ballots, so I took my name off. Then they tried a whole big campaign to make me Miss Northwestern. They were really trying to make me Miss. I'm not even dressing myself as a woman, but I always was feminine. I've been always. Are you kidding? Look at me. When was I? When was I not? Okay. Somebody told my mother, "Oh, you named her Gary, so you must have wanted a girl." And I told them, more than you ever know. She wanted a girl. I'm the third child in my family. I have 2 older brothers. So she wanted a girl, and here I am. And so, like I said, I grew up in North Brentwood, Maryland, one of 7 children. The lady next door, her name was Lucille Barber. I used to go to her house. She was a very nice lady. I used to go to her house. I'd go to the store and things like that for her. But what's most important, I could dress as I wanted to in her house. She used to give me dresses so I could wear them, and I'd sit up there and put on my dress and watch TV, and then I had to take my dress off to go home because, Mom and Daddy weren't standing for that, so My father was a corporal in World War II, and my mother was a housewife. But both of them were very loving. So a lot of things that people went through, God doesn't love you, all that kind of stuff. No, my mother and father didn't do that because they knew God loved everybody. And I used to get in these conversations with my father, and he was a really staunch supporter of Martin Luther King, and I said, I can get him that way. I said, you can march with Martin Luther King for everybody else's rights, but you're going to deny me mine. I was about 10 years old, 10, 11 years old. I was never a dumb child when, somebody called me homosexual when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I didn't know what it was. But I knew how to break a word apart, homo and sexual. I went and got the dictionary and I looked it up. And I said to myself, well, and I didn't really quite understand it because it's a person of the same sex that likes a person of the same sex. And I just wasn't getting it, because although I knew I was a boy, but I wasn't a boy, I was a girl. I had 2 sisters who were younger than me, and we used to play house. All of us would be the mother. All of us would. And I made a mistake one time when I was in the basement with my sister, and I said, when I get old enough, I'm going to wear a white gown, and Daddy's going to give me away. And I think they gave me away, huh? And but my parents never treated me any different than they treated my brothers and sisters. I think the most horrific part about it all, I always wanted my mother to accept me as a woman. And late in my mother's life, she had Alzheimer's, and she didn't know me. But she knew the nice girl who came to visit her. And I said, well, I got what I wanted, but I lost my mother. She didn't know me. But she knew I was a nice girl, and I said to myself, well, that made me feel really good that she thought of me as a nice girl. So when I started coming to Washington, D.C., and like I said, my first experience in Washington, D.C. at the gay club was the Lost and Found, because most of my friends were from high school white. And my best friend in high school and I decided when we graduated, we told each other we were gay, okay? And so I started going out with them, and something just wasn't right. I was going out with these gay men, and they were doing gay men things, and I didn't want to do gay men things. And so it just wasn't me. So then I found Louis the Rogue, which was me. I found a place where I could see people who were like me, and I met Gwen Alexander. I met Michelle Montgomery, Donna Summers, and all the black girls that were at the club. And through them, I met Tasha Love. And Tasha Love was telling me about the black bar that was not too far. We're going there after we leave here. And it was the Brass Rail. Honey, when I went in the Brass Rail and I saw all the black trans women, I said, oh my God, I am home. This is heaven. This has got to be the last day of my life, because I know this is not true. Okay, I'm a Maryland girl, and we didn't do that, in Maryland. But when I came to the Brass Rail, I was I was home. I felt like I was home. I met so many terrific people. These two right here, through the Brass Rail. I met a lot of different people through the Brass Rail. I also met prostitution through the Brass Rail, which was income, okay? So, the girls used to say, I'm naive. I'm from the sticks, which is right outside Washington, D.C., but I'm still naive. They were saying that they were going to work after they left the club. And I was saying to myself, oh, those poor girls, they got to go and work an 8-hour job. I thought they were really going to a legitimate job. So one day, one of the girls that I met at Brass Rail said, come on, you going to work with me? And she introduced me to what work was. Well, work was not hard. At times, work was enjoyable. I've never been incarcerated for any length of time, so I can't talk about that. I can talk about the few little times that I was in there and how when I got locked up for being in a car with somebody who was driving the car, but they got the car through a credit card. In some way, the credit card wasn't good. I'm a passenger, so I got locked up in Mount Rainier. He stayed in jail 1 day. I stayed in jail 3. I'm a passenger in the car. But because I'm transgender, they did not know. And I think, you know what? They get insulted. People get insulted when they can't pick you apart and know who you are or what you are. So they were unable to pick me apart when I was standing there waiting for the female officer to come and check me. So they couldn't pick me apart, but I waited for that female officer to come because I knew I had a better chance talking to her than I had talking to those 2 or 3 knuckleheads that were standing over here. So when she came, I simply told her, I'm transgender, and I still have my male parts. And she said, well, I told you, I was always good out my mouth with talking. I simply told her, I'm transgender. No, at that time, transgender wasn't even really a word. I was born male. And that's what I'll tell anybody. I was born male. And that's all the male that has ever, except for when they deliver it to my house, that I know. So I told her I was born male and I still have my male parts. So she went over there and told them, and she stayed with me the whole time till they put me in the car. I went to Upper Marlboro. I told you I stayed in there for 3 days. He only stayed in there for 1. But I refused to call my mother and father because I would never burden them with that. I promised myself when I was young and coming up that my burden to them would not be the fact that I'm gay, okay? None of the gay shit is gonna get, I can keep that to myself, okay? I can live this life. I know I can navigate it because I know who I am. But I'm not going to involve them in my gay stuff, okay? So, but the boy that was driving the car lived in the town that I lived in. So, anyway, I went to Upper Marlboro, and I stayed there for 3 days. And each day, the commanding officer would say, you're still here? When I was going out the door, he told me, I don't want to ever see you back down here because people like you come down here and disrupt my whole jail. Well, in the middle of the night, it was this guard that was really smart. He was a jackass. He used to come and he would say, and he would tell me to talk because my voice sounded like a girl. And he would tell the other guards, sound just like a girl, sound just like a girl. And I heard him. So the next time he came, I didn't say nothing to him. I just sat there and looked at him like I was Helen Keller. I just sat there and looked at him. And he got mad. So in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, he transfers me to this room about as big as this, men everywhere. I had to step over men to find myself a place to sit down or lay down. Luckily, it was 2 transgender girls that were in there, and they saw me and they said, oh my God, come here, come here. You gotta sit over here, because when they wake up in the morning and they see you, it's gonna be some shit. When these guys wake up, so then they do the lunch, they do the breakfast thing, right? And I'm sitting there, I don't want shit on this tray. All I want to do is go home. So I'm giving it away. Didn't know I was drawing attention to myself by giving the food away. Somebody from I stood up, and somebody on the other side of the room said, that's a girl, that's a girl. I said, oh my God. I immediately went to that window. You know the window I'm talking about. And I went to that window, and she looked up and saw me, and she said, oh my God, what are you doing in there? How'd you get in there? I said, they brought me around here like 3 o'clock in the morning. She said, you stand right there, stand right there. And she went and got a guard to get me and bring me out. But the 2 girls that I met after I got out, I saw them again, and we became friends. It was Sprite. One of them was Sprite. Remember Miss Sprite? Yeah. So, anyway, so go forward a little bit. My best friend, one of my best friends, passed away of AIDS, and he passed away of AIDS in 1986. And I wanted to do something because I saw his family pick him up and take him to the bathroom and take him and clean him and everything and stuff like that. And this was a time when people were very afraid of AIDS. We didn't know what it was coming from, but I saw his family lovingly care for him like that. And I wanted to be able to do something like that. So I found an advertisement in the Blaze, and it was for home health care workers to work with people with HIV. HIV AIDS, yeah. That's what they were saying at that time too. So it was HIV AIDS at that time, 88. HIV AIDS, yeah.
Or either acquired immune deficiency
syndrome, yeah, or whatever. But I started working for them in their private home. I had a few clients. One of my clients, the only black client that I had, was good friends with Ron Simmons and Larry Ferguson, who were the people who were organizing Us Helping Us. And it was around that time that they were organizing Us Helping Us. And so I used to see them every day, and because they would come to their friend's house after work, and they would speak and be real cordial and everything. So one day I'm in the brass rail drinking one hand, cigarette in the other hand. I'm just bebopping and dancing. And so Ron says, and I turn around and I look, and he says, oh, you're not only a sister, you're a sister. And I said, yeah, I'm your sister. And because he didn't know I was trans either. So then later on in life, I started working under Earline at Us Helping Us. And Ron and Larry saw me and said, that's the same girl that used to work, that was Fred's home health care aide. And so I went, and they took me in the office. They said, do you remember us? And I said, no, I don't. Honestly didn't. I saw him a few times, but I said, no, I did. This like 10 years later. Yeah, it's about 10 years later. And they said, you used to take care of a friend of ours, and we've always been grateful for what you did for him, and we wanted to do something for you. And so that's how I started working under Earline and at Us Helping Us. And after Earline left, I stepped into the head of transgender services at Us Helping Us, and that's how I started what I'm doing now. My transgender community has always been just everything to me. everything to me. Even when I was young, I always wanted to open this bar where it was owned and operated for and by trans people. Everybody who worked there would be trans, from the servers to the bartenders to the door people, everybody. That's always been a dream, and it still is. If I could have hit that 1.3 billion. If I could have hit that 1.3 billion, I'd buy a whole block in DC, and it would be the gayest festival anybody ever had. I love my community. I love my LGBTQ, AXI, XYZ, whatever it is. I love my people. So now I'm doing hepatitis C testing at Damien Ministries, but I'm also still doing Suge's Place. And we are currently just trying to get things back after this pandemic, get things back together. But like I said, my friends, my sisters, I've been knowing them, oh my God. We are really like family in a lot of ways. We love each other, and it was an honor, a privilege, a shock that I'm even part of this panel, and thank y'all so much for listening to my crap.
Can I add something? I think it's so important that because many young people don't know these names. You spoke the name Gwen Alexander.
Yes.
One of the most amazing show women and transgender women in Washington, D.C. But she was the first transgender woman to work for a national airline, openly trans, in Washington, D.C. Leslie Atwood, one of the most amazing celebrity stylists, hairstylists, models, openly trans woman, dated a well-known news person that later went on to glory, but she had a known love affair with this man. Everyone knew who he was. I'm not going to mention his name out of respect for the dead, but everyone knew who she was and knew how she was revered in the community. We talk about somebody I cannot forget, Linda Pendarvis. Oh my God. Our sister, brave warrior, was one of the first transgender women to go to her prom. Openly, bold at Weston, which is now, I think, was it Weston?
It was Weston.
Weston,
yeah.
which is now Duke Ellington.
Duke Ellington,
and baby, they have pictures that were in the news of her.
It ended up on the front cover of the Metro section of the Washington Post.
And she was groundbreaking for that.
They did not know she was trans.
How about that? So she just, you talk about groundbreaking trans women and men in our community that I feel like a lot of times we look at the folks, it's because of these people. We have Laverne Cox and Janet Mock and so many of these people today. It's because of those people, Pose and all Legendary and all of these people. They stand on other folks' shoulders. Don't think that they were the groundbreaking ones. They didn't kick the door. These women had to kick doors open, create doors, and build a bridge. So it's because of these women that these other folks stand on their shoulders.
Miss
It's
Paula
important.
Harris, I used to do the shows with her, and she used to take us to was it Gaithersburg, Hagerstown, one of them way up in the mountains to the some bar up there, honey.
To the Catskills.
It
Should
was
be up in the
really,
Catskills.
it was really hillbilly, and it had Deer Park Lodge. Deer Park Lodge. You heard of it? Deer Park Lodge. Yes, we did. We used to go there, and she also took me to Richmond, Virginia, where you were not allowed to touch the entertainers, which means if you were tipping somebody, you had to put their money on the floor, and they would have to pick it up because you could not pass the money to the entertainer.
Yeah, and people, I want you to know something. Oh God, you just tapped on something. I remember there was a time that there was the masquerading law on books in Washington, D.C. Masquerading, that you could be locked up on site if you looked like something other than your sex that you were born in. But if you didn't have on an article of male clothing or female clothing, you would be locked up right on site. Mm-hmm. Now, because I used to hang with the girls and I was soft and I was young, you know, I looked like a girl. So they would let me just go on by my way. What you doing out there hanging around? So they would just let me go on. And most of the time I could talk my way out of stuff. But I remember how the police were not as always nice to the girls, how they tried to do things that were unflattering, rip their wigs off, tear their dresses up. And the girls were smart. They would have on boxers underneath and a t-shirt. And the police couldn't lock them up. The girls got hit. And it was like, yeah, I'm not who you thought I was, but you can't lock me up. And the police, I remember some of the girls would have to tie their dresses back around and turn them around and do things. And I remember the girls always had change of clothing because a lot of times the police would harass the girls and the girls would have to run through the alley and change their clothes. They go in looking like Storm, come out looking like Wonder Woman at the end of the alley because they had to do whatever they had to do because the police would harass the girls so hard and so bad, you know, so.
But it's because of the activism that we had and advocates like myself and many others that we fought against all of that. And I have to say, Sergeant Brett Parson, I have to say his name because he was instrumental in getting a lot of stuff done and making sure that we, you know, if officers were found to violate a transgender right, that they were punished. Despite what's going on in his life right now, he was someone that I admired and I revered. And I'll never forget Sergeant Brett Parson. He called me when the girls were shot, wounded, sitting in the car, 2 bodies, Steph and Yukia. I'll never forget that dreadful morning when he called me and told me to come up. And myself and Patty went there. So it's been so much. And you know, this murder we had of Star Parker here, we hadn't had a murder in 5 years. So it just tore my heart, and I knew I had to be a part of it. And the family at first was not receptive, but eventually the sister convinced the mother. And when they came to the candlelight vigil, they said, "Oh, you're beautiful. Oh, you're the one doing this? Oh, okay, well, we'll let you do the program and everything." And I did everything. They had a lot of demands. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Earline. That was a perfect moment. And thank you, Rayceen. Thank you, Gabrielle. I want to thank all of you here for coming to the panel tonight. As you can see, we talked a bit. We collected a lot of names and places in the community. We kind of ran out of time for questions, so you're going to have to save those for next time or get in touch with us online or something. We've got a little bit of time. I just wanted to throw out a last plug here. I want to thank, I've got a couple of my board members here. Glenn is our chair, and Jeff is our head of oral history. So you can talk with them about you know, getting involved with our group and some of the things we've got going on. As part of the Trans History Initiative that Rainbow History Project is doing this year, we are looking for people to get involved to help us work on this very important history. So I took 2 pages of names and places, because some of those I'd never even heard of. So we've got a lot of work to do in terms of researching and documenting this. We have timelines of trans history in DC that we need people helping us to update. We also have a Places and Spaces database. You can see online from our website. It's a map that shows you all of the different places in our history here. I think it's got about 460 entries, but I heard a couple clubs tonight that I don't know we have recorded, so we need people to work on that. As I said before, we do have a grant from the mayor's office to help hire some paid positions to get people working on this. So if you know anyone, please get involved with us. If you're watching from home, check us out at rainbowhistory.org. Thank you very much.